We are ready to start the Tuesday, August 20, Planning and Zoning and Historical Committee meeting. Our last committee meeting of this term. It's been an honor to serve you as your chair for the last 2 years. I also appreciate the co-chairs, the vice chairs that have helped us move the committee forward, and each one of you appreciate making an effort to attend the meetings so we can engage in conversations about what type of city we want to build. So I'm going to start with the consent agenda, and some of the items were already pulled by Councilmember Mina Johnson. And if any of you want to pull any other items, just let me know, and I'm happy to do that. Councilmember Sledge.
Thank you, Chair. If you could, can we just pull every bill off consent that had a disapproval from the Planning Commission, if that's okay with the committee?
We usually do that.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you. Very good request. Any other questions, comments before we start? All right. So I'll start the consent agenda. RS 2019-1897 by Syracuse, Bedney, and O'Connell. It approves an intergovernmental agreement between the Tennessee Department of Transportation and Metro Public Works for a traffic signal improvement in connection with the Donaldson Pike interchange. RS 2019-1898 by Hager, Burchett, and others. It approves an intergovernmental agreement between the Tennessee Department of Transportation and the Metro Department of Public Works for the reimbursement of railroads crossing safety improvements at Old Hickory Boulevard. BL 2019-1623 by Councilmember Haywood. It changes 20.49 acres from RS20 to AR20. I'm sorry, but we don't have a letter. I'm going to move this to the hill. And we'll need a letter, or we need a council member here. BL 2019-1718. Again, we don't have a letter for this one, I don't think. Let me check. This one doesn't have a letter, and Councilmember Scott Davis is not here, so I'm going to pull it as well. The same with 1719. Goodness. $1720. We need a letter, or we need the council member to be here. Also 1721 by Councilmember Potts. 1722. I'm reading the ones that we are not going to be able to include in the consent agenda for lack of a letter or the sponsor here. 1724. 1725. 1727. 1741. 'Sorry? No, it's not. We have another item that it is in the consent agenda is BL 2019-1742 by Councilmember Porterfield. We do have a letter to approve. It changes 43.21 acres from R20 to IWD zoning for property located at 2581, 2591, 2601, and 2611 Couchville Pike. BL 2019-1743 by Councilmember Sledge. It changes 0.83 acres from IWD to MULA zoning for property located at 2214, 2216, 2218, and 2220 Dunn Avenue. Another one that we don't have a letter is 1744. And by Councilmember Lee, we don't have a letter either. And that will be 1745, so we're also going to move that one. BL 2019-1746 by Councilmember Sledge. It changes 1.31 acres from CS to MUGA zoning for property located at 1107 8th Avenue South. BL 2019-1747 by Councilmember Sledge. It cancels 1.31 acres of a commercial plan unit development overlay district for a property located at 1107 8th Avenue South. Another item to move is 1748. We don't have a letter. BL 2019-1749 by Councilmember Syracuse. It amends 233.83 acres of the downtown Donaldson Urban Design Overlay District for various properties located on Lebanon Pike from Briley Parkway to Mann Road and Old Lebanon Pike, GBS Style Drive, Donaldson Pike, Fairway Drive, McGavock Pike, Cramp Drive, Park Drive, Galen Drive, Cliffdale Drive, and Benson Road. We have an item by Councilmember Elrod that needs the letter as well, and that will be 1751. BL 2019-1752 by Councilmember Sledge. It changes 1.23 acres from CS and CN to MULA zoning for property located at 910, 912, and 926 13th Avenue South and 13th Avenue South and number. 1753 by Scott Davis needs a letter. BL 2019-1754 by Councilmember Wieters. It changes 0.13 acres from CN to MULA zoning for property located at 307 South 11th Street. There is an item by Councilmember Van Rees, 1755, that needs a letter. 1756 by Scott Davis needs a letter. 1757 by Councilmember Hall needs a letter. 1758 by Councilmember Scott Davis needs a letter. BL 2019-1759 by Councilmember Kendall and Glover. It changes 0.4 acres from RS5 to R6A zoning for a property located at 2301 Alameda Street. The next item that needs a letter is 1760. 1762 needs a letter. BL 2019-1763 by Councilmember Murphy. It amends 1.92 acres of a specific plan zoning district for a property located at 405 40th Avenue North to permit a mixed-use development. 1764 has an amendment, but it has a letter to approve. So technically yeah. All right. BL 2019-7, Councilmember Glover?
Just very quickly, all right, so if there is the amendment and there's a letter to approve, does the amendment still need to be moved?
Doesn't have to be. She can move the amendment she can move the amendment on the floor tonight.
Okay, all right, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Glover. So this one will be included on the consent agenda is BL 2019-1764 by Councilmember Roberts. It changes 3.82 acres from CS to SP zoning for various properties located east of 51st Street Avenue North to permit 400 multifamily residential units and 26,000 square feet of non-residential uses. Like I said, there is a letter to approve. We have one by Councilmember Primor, BL 2019-1765. It changes 1.96 acres from RS 7.5 to SP zoning for property located at Shannon Avenue and number to permit 28 multifamily residential units. We have one by Councilmember Swope that needs a letter. That is 1768.
About 1766. 1766, all right.
66 was pulled.
Okay, sorry.
Just out of curiosity, please.
Yeah, let me turn the microphone on you. Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you, Chair. That one got pulled, and that's why I asked specifically, because it just has an amendment to it. So that's why I was asking if you're not here and there is a letter, but I'm here now. So it was pulled for what reason, if I may ask?
Councilmember Mina Johnson requested to be pulled.
Oh, okay. All right, very good. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks for asking. And just for the viewing audience, when we pull an item from the consent agenda, it's because some of the committee members have requested that we remove it from the consent agenda so it can be discussed on the committee. BL 2019-1770 by Councilmember O'Connell. It changes 0.72 acres from R6A to SP zoning for property located at 1304 and 1306 Hawkins Street to permit 9 multifamily residential units. BL 2019-1771 by Councilmembers Kendall and Glover. It changes 0.44 acres from RS5 to R6A zoning for property located at 2411 and 2413 Booker Street. BL 2019-1772 by Councilmember O'Connell. It cancels a planned unit development located at 9 Carroll Street, 72 and 78 Charles C. Davis Boulevard, 78, 92, and 128 Lafayette Street. Did I say Lafayette okay? Yeah. Okay. I'm trying. BL 2019-1773 by O'Connell. It changes from CS and RM20 to SP zoning for a property located at 9 Carroll Street, 72 and 78 Charles C. Davis Boulevard, 78, 92, and 128 Lafayette Street, at the corner of Lewis Street and Lafayette Street to permit a mixed-use development. BL 2019-1774 by Porterfield. There is the letter to approve. It changes 3.06 acres from CS to SP zoning for property located at 2540 Murfreesboro Pike and Lakeville Drive unnumbered to permit 50 multifamily residential units and a maximum of 10,000 square feet of commercial use.
As an amendment. You have in a letter.
There is a letter to approve requesting, let me read it to you. I'm the sponsor, co-sponsor of the above referenced legislation that is on the Planning, Zoning, and Historical Committee. The agenda scheduled for today, August 20. I'm unable to attend this meeting and requesting for approval. And it's signed by the council member.
Committee can approve the underlying ordinance and then she can add the amendment on the floor.
Mm-hmm. So as Mike was saying before, she can move the amendment in the floor, and then we'll just can choose to put it on the consent agenda. Do you want to move it out of the consent agenda? Okay. So it's still on the consent agenda. Next item is BL 2019-1776, as amended by Councilmember Glover. It changes 21.73 acres from RS15 to SP zoning for property located at 4139, 4161, 4169, 4179, 4185, 4193, and 4211 Central Pike and number to permit a mixed-use development. BL 2019-1778 by Councilmember O'Connell. It changes 0.6 acres from R6A to SP for property located at 1514, 1516, 1518, Edge Hill Avenue to permit 10 multi-family residential units. There's another one by Councilmember Scott Davis I'm going to move, and that is 1779. Needs a letter. We have one by Councilmember Swope that doesn't have a letter, and that is 1780. BL 2019-1782 by Councilmember O'Connell. It changes 1.18 acres from R6A to SP zoning on property located at 1825, 1827, 1829, 1831, 1833, and 1835 3rd Avenue North to permit 29 multifamily residential units. BL 2019-1784 by Councilmember Anthony Davis. We don't have a letter, and that is 1784. I'm moving it. The next, you'll sign on it? Can he sign now?
We don't have that hard copy, but we can go get it to the clerk's office.
If you want to go right and get it. It's 1784. Are we losing quorum if he works out?
No.
Okay. BL 2019-1785 by Councilmember O'Connell. It amends 0.85 acres on a specific plan for various properties located west of Jenkins Street to permit owner-occupied short-term rental properties. BL 2019-1787 by Councilmember Kendall and Glover. It changes 3.89 acres from CS and IR to MUGA zoning for property located at 2200 Charlotte Avenue. BL 2019-1788 by Councilmember O'Connell. It changes 0.32 acres from IR to SP zoning for property located at 1418, 1420 3rd Avenue North to permit a mixed-use development. BL 2019-1789 by Councilmembers Kendall and Glover. It changes 2.52 acres from IR to CSA zoning for property located at 627 19th Avenue North. And the last item on the consent agenda is BL 2019-1790 by Kendall and Glover. It changes 0.20 acres from RS5 to R6A zoning for property located at 525 31st Avenue North. Councilmember Glover.
Just very quickly, I'll wait until Mr. Jameson's ready.
Did you sign up on that one? So I'm going to bring that up as well, if that's okay with you, Councilman?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Another item we're adding to the consent agenda is BL 2019-1784 by Anthony Davis. It amends 0.7 acres of the Porter Road specific plan for property located at 1505, 1509 Porter Road to remove all commercial space and replace with a maximum of 24 multifamily residential units. I think Councilmember Elrod had one, right? Did I miss that one?
Did y'all just approve something? I'm sorry. Did y'all just approve something? I was talking to Freddie and I missed it.
Oh, just the one from Anthony Davis.
Okay.
Councilmember Elrod is here now, so we can read his one, and that is BL 2019-1751. It changes 0.28 acres from RS10 to R10 zoning for property located at 4920 Shasta Drive. Those are all the items on the consent agenda, and Councilmember Glover wants to ask you a personal question.
Okay, so Mr. Jameson, actually I'm going to ask you two questions, if I may. Because Councilmember Davis is not here, and because it will be deferred by rule, he will have to suspend the rule on every. So my question is, Chair, would you mind holding some of his that have not been asked to be pulled? I will go sign on with those in order to hopefully keep us moving tonight in the meeting. Otherwise, we're going to be asked for, defer, suspension of rules on multiple bills.
Councilmember Glover, that is very nice of you. I think you should do that.
Well, I'm just asking, I mean, if I do that, then he doesn't have to suspend the rules.
Yeah, I'll wait for you. We'll wait for
All right, so, Mr. Jameson, can you just very quickly tell me the numbers, and I'll go back here, and I will make sure I go do that right now. Sorry, Chair.
you. It's okay.
So that would be items,
Councilmember Murphy?
I'm sorry, I was distracted because I was talking to the planning director about planning things. I want to make sure that we're treating everybody fairly. So what we're doing for Councilman Davis, are we doing that for other council members who also didn't do what they needed to do to apply letters and things like that?
Yeah, that's
I
a great
believe
question.
It just happened.
Okay.
You are
I just want to
welcome.
make sure.
Any of you that wants to go and sign on the legislation, if anybody is not here, are welcome to do it. We'll wait. This is the last meeting. Let's finish this right. So I'll tell you who wasn't here. We have a letter. You can go and sign if you want to.
I just want to make sure that we're applying the rules to everyone fairly.
I hope I am, but thank you. Councilmember Wieters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to address the question from Councilmember Murphy, in that particular case, I do respect the drive toward continuity and how we handle these cases. But for the Porter Road case, that is in the Rosebank neighborhood, which it lies in both District 6 and 7, and so I'm very familiar with that particular project, and that's why I'm comfortable signing on to it. Some of my colleagues' bills I would not necessarily be comfortable signing on to, but appreciate that point.
Thank you.
Well, that's fine.
all these are,
Councilmember Glover had another question for you.
sorry.
No, I mean, I'm fine. If you guys don't want me to sign on and we want to spend the night here, I'm okay with that.
Nobody
I'm just
said
trying to cut through the timeline.
I don't think anybody said that.
Okay,
I mean,
well, no, all right, so, Mr. Jameson, if I may, I'll get the
Councilmember,
numbers.
sorry. You do have one that is not on consent, so I will.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, yeah. Mhm.
So we could go through the numbers, or we could start back at the top of the agenda, and just as we come to one that is a Scott Davis bill, bump it to the heel, whichever the committee.
Whatever the pleasure of the chair is, I'm fine with that.
That's a lot of power for me. I'll think about
Your
it.
last day, enjoy it, man, relish it.
All right. Thank you. Well, I hope it's not my last day. All right. Okay. So, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? There is a motion. Is there a second?
Well, point of order.
Yes, sir.
If we pass the consent agenda, have we not just, I mean, maybe I misunderstood you.
We can add items to the consent agenda later.
You can group those that come after this.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. However you want to do it, that's fine.
Yeah. I promise you. I give you my word that we'll.
No, I'm not worried about that. I'm just trying to make sure we try to operate efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you. So, the consent agenda we just came up with, and we have a motion by Councilmember Wieters. Do I have a second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Oppose? All right. So now I'm going to start going over the items that are not on consent, which are quite a bit. And then I would like you guys to stay after that because Councilmember Berkeley Allen would like to engage in a conversation about her legislation. So I'm going to start with items that were not on consent. The first one is BL 2018. This is on third reading. BL 2018-1363 by Councilmembers Hueso and Glover. It changes 5.15 acres from RS10 to SP zoning for property located at 940, 944 Curry Road and Curry Road and number to permit 24 multifamily residential units. Councilmember Glover.
Yeah, let me deal with it. Thank you. So, Chair, I'm going to withdraw this. I've spoken to the developer, and I really don't want to use this opportunity to preach too much. However, I feel like I have to, because unfortunately, when we all get involved in each other's districts, these are the kind of things that occur. And the developer has said that He's not going to withdraw it. He's going to withdraw it. He's not going to bring it back for the SP. And so I just want to make sure people understand that when he does the straight zoning with it, then they'll have no more input. They will do straight zoning, and that's what's going to occur. And I regret that the timeline ran out as well. I assure you, and I will remind everybody in the chamber, and especially you, Chair, I signed on this to help, just like I'm trying to do with some of these tonight, as many of us have done throughout the course of the term. I think it's very dangerous when we're crossing over into each other's territories and in our districts, because there are a lot of moving parts. And this one, I couldn't say, who was right and who was wrong. I know there were a lot of blunders. And so therefore, I just hope that in the next term that people, I realize that a lot of folks say councilmanic courtesy is not a good thing. However, if it's not a good thing, then the whole room should be at-large members. We're elected by the people in our district to represent us. On this one, I get the fact of this one, but I hope that we will be cautious going forward. So with that, I will be withdrawing this bill. Thank you.
All right, so there is no vote, right?
Correct.
All right, thank you, Councilmember. Okay, the other item that, this was an item that wasn't on consent, but the sponsor is not here. That's Scott Davis. That's BL 2019-1464. All right, so we can wait till the end. But if the sponsor is not here and there's no letter?
Defer by rule or bump it to the heel? Do you want to bump to the heel or defer by rule?
So let me ask you all, just for the rest of the meeting to get your sense on how we should do things like this. Should we bump this to the heel or just vote to defer by rule? I mean, all right, so I need somebody to make a motion. I have a motion to defer BL 2019-1464. Let me read it. It changes 0.20 acres from SPR to RM15A zoning for the property located at 1218 Montgomery Avenue. So I have a motion to defer by rule. And then do I have a second? I have a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. You want to talk about this? Yes. Councilmember Wieters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If Councilmember Davis were to appear in the chamber during our meeting, would he be able to put it back on an agenda for discussion? Or does this deferral by rule control?
So he could suspend the rule. He'll have to suspend. This is a bill that required 3 rule suspensions. This had to be reinstated at the last meeting. Did not get that rule suspended. It's been placed on this agenda with a timely request, but now it's been more than 90 days, so he has to suspend Rule 23, and then he'll have to suspend the rule that requires committee consideration since the committee is deferring by rule.
Thank you for that explanation. But just within the course of this actual committee meeting, if he were to appear and to request to have a deliberation on it,
Sure.
would he still be able to do that within this committee if he should appear in time?
Yeah, he could ask the committee to rescind and then ask for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
All right, all in favor of the defer, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It's deferred. Next item. Again, it was by Councilmember Scott Davis. And Councilmember Glover, this is 1516. Councilmember Glover? Okay, I'll move to the. Yeah, I'm signing it now. All right. 1516. Yes, it was just pulled by Councilmember Mina Johnson. Okay, now we're going into one that was disapproved by the Planning Commission.
Do you want to take up 1516? I mean, he's just signed it, so you could.
Well, I was going to wait till he did all of it.
Okay.
Yes.
So I apologize. Tell me which way you would prefer for me to handle this. The disapproved, I'm fine with with deferral by rule because it is disapproved, and if he's not here, then that part I'm not willing to take
Well,
that battle
I just
on.
asked the committee, and
Okay.
what they told me is if he's not here and is disapproved, then they're going to want to see the fair
Okay,
by
then
rule.
I'm going to scratch where I've signed, in the event I've accidentally signed one disapproved.
Okay.
Thank you,
But
Chair.
all the ones you're signing now, when we are done, we're going to do a new consent agenda of the ones that were not pulled, and then I'm going to ask the committee to consider keeping them on the consent agenda.
Okay,
So you
thank
tell
you.
me, you tell me when you're ready.
I've got a stack. Hold on, yeah, I'll
All right,
do it as
we'll-
quick as
we'll work.
possible. Thank
So
you.
let's go to the one that is disapproved. This is by Councilmember Hastings. He's not here.
Sorry.
So that's BL 2019-1611. We don't have a letter. It changes approximately 5.31 acres from R8 to SP zoning for property located at 1014B and 1018 West Trinity Lane, and portions of property located at 948B Youngs Lane, and number, and 1014C and 1014D West Trinity Lane to permit a mixed-use development with 117 multifamily residential units and 24,000 square feet of non-residential units. So we need a motion. We have a move to defer. We have a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? This is defer. All right. The next item is by Councilmember O'Connell. It's not on consent. It was disapproved by the Planning Commission. It's BL 2019-1614 by Councilmember O'Connell. It amends the Metro Code pertaining to prohibited signs. Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to, do I have an amendment on this one? Two
There is
amendments?
a proposed amendment. yeah.
Okay, one of them I'm pretty sure is a housekeeping amendment, right? Yeah, I'm gonna move the amendment, please.
So we have the council member is moving the amendment to his legislation. There is a second. All in favor say aye. Oppose? All right. So let's have a discussion.
I think he just wanted to vote no. I'm not sure there's much discussion here. I guess I'm ready. So we've got the bill as amended now?
Okay, let's raise hands. All in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. Oppose? The amendment passes. Councilmember Berkeley Allen, would you like to talk about the amendment or the legislation?
There was another amendment that is not my amendment that I do not intend to move.
Okay. So is that amendment yours?
No. I don't like that amendment. I don't want it to come. I just wanted a quick explanation of what this bill does and why we think it's good.
Yeah, Councilmember O'Connell, why do you think it's good?
That's a harder question to answer, I suppose. The reason it is good is, so basically what this does is it tries to move a non-conforming digital billboard into conformance by changing the underlying zoning. It is right on the edge of the interstate. I've worked carefully with the council office to basically create a very narrow text amendment. We did a considerable amount of community outreach. None of the area residential community has particular concerns about it. And so at this point, the billboard has already been operating as a digital display for quite some time. So this is, from the standpoint of the billboard operator, this is basically a fix-it bill, and that is it.
Okay. Any more questions?
One final question. Is this within 100 feet of any residential areas or any of those distances that make us nervous?
It is, and it's within that distance, but with MDHA and a community member, we did a considerable amount of direct outreach, and I don't think I have it on my desk anymore, but at the meeting when this was originally to be in front of the committee, we had a sheet of a bunch of folks who basically signed off on saying this was not, this zoning bill in particular was not of concern.
Okay, is that it? Okay. Councilmember Mina Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. So if I understand correctly, so Councilmember Connell's amendment, originally this was one location was attached, so as an exhibit. So amendment, it will remove that exhibit. So
No, that is not my amendment, I don't believe. It is?
Yes, that's
Okay.
what it says.
All right. Okay, there was another amendment that I thought did that as well, but this one, okay, that's fine.
So this amendment, so I'm kind of utterly confused. If you are removing that exhibit, so what exactly this bill do? Still just giving the special exception to one existing digital billboard, or what's the intent?
That is still the intent of the bill, but I think Mr. Jameson can speak to the cleanup.
That is correct. There is only one billboard that this would apply to. If you read the description along this combined interstate segment of I-40 and I-65 near downtown along the west side, the exhibit was not referenced in the text of the language. It simply was a map of where that billboard is, but it was not referenced, and because it's not referenced, it was not proper to include as a referenced exhibit.
So if, by approving this, are we in a subject to open up all the area within that alongside of the section, or it just still apply to this one specific billboard?
Because the area that would be approved is so narrowly tailored, and because of the distancing requirements that have to be imposed between billboards, you're only approving one location. I'm looking behind you at the attorney that I know is representing that party, and he's nodding, so I'm going to assume that that I'm correct.
So I understand. So even though if this one is applied to this one specific billboard, I think it was when a Board of Zoning Appeal was so happy to change every single billboard to LED, and there was that kind of time. So for that specific reason, I am not comfortable supporting this one. So please mark myself no. And it's all other else is whichever the committees will, but I would like to be marked as opposed.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Sledge.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question for the planning staff. With the amendment, is this bill still disapproved by the commission?
It is. The amendment does not change the recommendation of planning. From planning's perspective, bills such as zoning ordinances or amendments to the text should be applicable kind of countywide and not specifically to certain areas. It needs to be a more holistic approach to the approval of digital signs. And so it's kind of a fundamental issue with a text amendment that's so narrowly focused.
Thank you. For consistency's sake, I'm going to move to defer this disapproved bill.
Okay, we have a motion to defer the bill. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Opposed, raise your hand.
3. Deferral wins, depending on how you.
I'm abstaining.
For deferral? All right, 5, 4, 3 against.
Mr. Chair, what was the final vote there?
5 for deferral, 3 against deferral.
The motion was to defer, so we're done with this one. All right, and there was another amendment by Councilmember Saul, but he's not here, so there's no moving of that legislation. So 16, 14 was deferred. Next item. By Councilmember Hastings, BL 2019-1682. It was disapproved by the Planning Commission. It changes 1.96 acres from R8 to MULA zoning for property located at 1012, 1014 West Trinity Lane. Councilmember Hager, you want to talk about this one? No? On the one before?
62 bills.
Well, it was the first, so, okay. So, Councilmember Sledge.
Move to defer.
We have a motion to defer. The sponsor is not here. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose?
What was that vote? I'm sorry.
1782 was deferred.
Okay, great. 1682. So tonight's meeting is the last one, too.
Okay, we're going to do some Scott Davis legislations that are not going to be co-sponsored by Councilmember Glover, and so you guys can take a stab at it. BL 2019-1728 by Councilmember Scott Davis. It was disapproved by the Planning Commission. It changes 2.66 acres from RM28 to MULA zoning for property located at 818, 820, 822, 824, 826, and 828 Cherokee Avenue. Councilmember Sledge.
Move to defer.
Councilman Davis.
Oh, there is Councilmember Scott Davis. What are you mad at? Why are you looking at me like that? Okay. So would you like to speak about your we just have a motion to defer by Councilmember Sledge. So I'm going to get the sponsor on the mic. You want to speak about the deferral?
Let's discuss the bill. I'm here.
We are at BL 2019-1728. That's the one on Cherokee Avenue. And Councilmember Sledge just made a motion to defer.
I asked him kindly to withdraw the motion, please.
What?
Sorry. I asked him kindly to withdraw the motion, please.
Councilmember Sledge.
I renew my motion.
So we have he renews his motion. So you want to make an argument against the defer? Like, please don't defer. I want to talk about it.
Let's not defer because I want to talk about it.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion. Is there a second? Second. There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Councilmember Glover, you wanna? You had requested to talk? No? All right. Yes, sir.
The other bills prior to 28 here, you're going to move all of the approved to the end. I'm just trying to make sure I'm keeping up with where we are in the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so this is where we are. We have a motion to defer by Councilmember Sledge. Councilmember Scott Davis is asking you not to defer. And now I'm going to ask you to vote on that request of a deferral. All in favor of the deferral, raise your hand.
Point of order. I was in the room when he said that. The cameras will verify that. So does it defer by rule if I'm in chambers?
It's not a deferral by rule. He's just asking to defer.
Oh.
Well, he's asking to defer the legislation.
I thought I heard him say defer by rule.
Okay, sorry. The point is, it's not because you're not here. It's because, well, I don't want to speak for you. Councilmember, sorry. There you go.
I'm under no obligation to explain my motion. I renew my motion.
All right. So all in favor, raise your hand. Okay. Against, raise your hand.
4-3 against.
It was deferred by the committee. All right. Next item. It was disapproved by the Planning Commission. This is BL 2019-1729. It changes 0.36 acres from RS5 to R6A zoning for property located at 329 Edwin Street. Councilmember Scott Davis, this is yours.
Let's see. I know, unless you have any. I'd like to move I'd like to open for discussion. In a second.
He's not in the committee. So I'm asking you to make a case for your legislation so somebody else can choose to move it. Councilmember Glover is making a motion to approve. Is there a second? There's no second.
Fails for lack of a second.
So that's it. All right. Next item. If you guys can bear with me for a minute. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is do a second consent agenda, okay? And I have some letters that were added now, so I'm going to go through the ones that are now have a letter to approve, okay? So, okay, actually, there is one, Councilmember Davis, that Mina Johnson had requested that we pull, so we can do that before the consent agenda, if that is 1516, BL 2019-1516. It changes 0.18 acres from RS5 to SP zoning for property located at 725 Hart Avenue to permit up to 3 residential units. We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Now that I've caught my breath a little bit, I was prepared to move a substitute on this, but maybe about an hour ago, I received a petition. And at first, I thought it was kind of fake. So I called some of the neighbors that signed, like Calvin that lives at 726 across the street, and the neighbors right next door. They're fine with how it is. And so I'm going to not substitute the bill and move it forward. And if I had time, you know, it'll be placed on their desk, especially when I have a 50-year-old resident on Hart that lives right next door to it saying that they're okay with it, you know, because they were told that this was going to be Airbnb, which it can't. They were told it was going to be a 4-story hotel, or it's going to be 5 units, and it's not. And we had a meeting at the Maxwell Heights Neighborhood Association a week ago, and the majority of people there were in favor of this, which at first I'm like, this can't be. I've been hearing, you know, for a couple of people that no one wants it, no one wants it. But seeing the evidence of the neighbors and speaking to the neighbor that's directly affected, Calvin on Hart Avenue, he's fine with it. You know, he didn't like it when he was told it was going to be a hotel, but it's not a hotel. You know, it's just 3 regular, you know, single-family units. So I'm going to move approval. It's approved by the Planning Commission.
Well, there was a motion already and a second. You don't want to move the substitute? Council Lady Mina Johnson, you are on the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wanted to have clarification because we all received an email from council member-elect for this district. And then on this particular bill, it says, please consider voting yes on the substitute bill, not the original. It says neither applicant nor neighbors are especially happy about the substitute, but it is something everyone can live with. So neighbors are strongly opposed to the original proposal to build 3 small homes on the small lot. And I think the substitute is one detached duplex. So I'm utterly confused. I'm comfortable approving substitute, but under the circumstances, I'm not comfortable approving the original bill.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Wieters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I made a comment on the floor that the Maxwell Heights neighborhood leader came to us and expressed confusion about the bill, that there had been discussions for over a year, and yet the bill that was brought before us did not reflect those discussions. I stated on the floor that unless I heard from the neighborhood leader, the neighborhood association leader, that her and that group's concerns had been resolved, that I would not be supporting the bill. So I will not be supporting this bill unless I hear that from that neighborhood leader. I won't be supporting either version of this bill.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Glover.
I mean, I'm just going to simply say again, it's an approved bill. We keep climbing into each other's districts, and that's what we've done. I just hope in the next term this is not done, because I think it gets very dangerous. I'm going to go with it because, I mean, again, it's an approved bill. He's done the meetings, et cetera. So anyway, thank you.
Councilmember Murphy.
So, just for clarification, Mr. Jameson, if this bill does not move forward tonight, and the next council person who we have heard from for this district would like to move it forward in October, it would not have to go back through planning, right? They could bring it back with a substitute, or they could bring it back, and we would have a public hearing and hear from these neighbors that have supposedly changed their mind. Is that right?
So procedurally, the process in the council does start over. Any bill that's not resolved tonight essentially is withdrawn, and we'd begin again. But the planning recommendations for each of these bills persists for 2 years, and so that would apply to this bill as well as to others that aren't resolved.
Okay, so since we do have conflicting information, I feel totally comfortable with letting the new council member handle this, so we can just get that clarification, because it is a rush tonight, and I know that we have a lot of bills. And while we do have a motion on the floor, I guess I'll just go ahead and call the question for that, or I've been talking, so I guess I can't.
No, you just make a new motion.
Okay, so I'll make the motion to just go ahead and call the question. Let's vote and move on.
You make a motion to defer.
We have a motion on the floor.
For the previous question,
Oh.
to go to a motion.
All right, so we have a motion for the previous question. All in favor, say aye. Is it about the previous question? Yes. Okay, don't get upset.
You know, the meetings at the East Precinct are
hold on.
recorded.
Sir, it's not
So if the
good.
councilman-elect disagree,
Councilmember Glover?
Yeah, just very quickly, Mr. Jameson, I'm really kind of confused. I don't remember us calling questions in committee. I thought we talked it all the way through, and then when we're on the floor, if it gets called, we vote. Otherwise, we talk it through here in committee. That really is the purpose of committee. Am I incorrect in that?
No, that's traditionally been that the previous question is a rule that is called on the floor, but each committee operates by its own rules. So if there's a previous question motion, it's in the deference of the committee chair to recognize that and call a vote should he wish.
Well, then, Chair, I will leave it up to you. I just think that, we seem to be inventing ourselves again in the last meeting of this term. Thank you.
Yeah, but it's calling the question. We are not.
You're the chair, if that's what you want to do.
I think she called the question, you guys vote. All in favor of calling the question, raise your hand. Just call the question.
2, 3, 4. It fails. It takes 2/3.
It failed.
It fails. It takes
Okay,
2/3.
so it failed, so we continue the conversation. Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would ask planning, am I correct that the bill as originally filed was approved by the commission?
That's correct. The Planning Commission made a recommendation of approval with conditions and disapproval without. The application as originally filed included not owner-occupied short-term rentals, but those were removed by the Planning Commission, and so they're not included, and that's how the bill was filed.
Okay.
So it was approval.
Perfect. Would the substitute, can you speak to whether it would be approved by, I guess, the commission, or would it get a staff recommendation? Would it be consistent with policy?
Having not seen any plan associated with the substitute, it would be difficult to determine what would be considered. I think it makes it 2 units, a principal unit and a subservient unit, as opposed to 3 units orienting to the primary street that's going through. And so the orientation would change. And so I think we'd have to see a plan, but the orientation was one of the reasons for the approval of the original with the 3 units.
Thank you. I'm comfortable with the bill as originally filed.
All right, so there is nobody else on the queue. There is a motion to approve without the substitute. It was second. So all in favor, raise your hand.
4, 5.
All opposed, raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 to 5.
It's a tie. Okay. What I'm going to do now is, if it's okay with the rest of you, is I'm going to go through all the Scott Davis legislations that he's here now that were on the consent agenda, and the ones that I have letters for, and make a new consent agenda. Is there any opposition to that? All right, so I'm going to start reading the ones that didn't have any opposition or that were supposed to be on consent to begin with. All right? If you guys give me a minute, I want to make sure I check all these letters, and then I'll start.
He's got your letter, so it's.
Councilmember Scott Davis,
I
yeah.
had a bill I wanted to withdraw.
Okay. When I read them, you can tell me that you want to withdraw it, okay? Is that okay?
That's why
Thank you, sir. It'll take me a couple of minutes, so talk among yourselves. All right. So I'm going to start going through the second consent agenda. Like I said, at any time, if you all want me to pull anything out or you want to withdraw, like Councilmember Scott Davis said, just make sure I see you. All right? Did I do this one already?
15, 16. Yes, that was the one we just had a time vote on.
Okay, the first item on the new consent agenda is BL 2019-1718 by Councilmember Scott Davis. It changes 15.14 acres from CS, CL, OR20, and R6 to MULA zoning for various properties located along East Trinity Lane between the CSX Railroad and Gallatin Pike. That was approved by the Commission. BL 2019-1719 by Councilmember Scott Davis, approved by with conditions. It changes 0.34 acres from R6A to SP zoning for property located at 314 and 316 Duke Street to permit 5 multifamily residential units. BL 2019-1720 by Councilmember Scott Davis, approved by the Planning Commission. It changes 0.29 acres from SPR to R6A zoning for property located at 1026 North 7th Street. BL 2019-1721 by Councilmember Potts. We have a letter to approve. It cancels 4.77 acres of a planned unit development for a property located at Wallace Road. BL 2019-1722 by Councilmember Scott Davis, approved by the Commission. It changes 2.87 acres from IR to MUNA zoning for property located at 747 Douglas Avenue. BL 2019-1724 by Councilmember Scott Davis. It changes 0.51 acres from RS5 to RM20A zoning for property located at 1519 Meridian Street. It changes from RS5 to RM15A zoning for property located at 1523 Meridian Street. BL 2019-1725 by Councilmember Scott Davis. It changes 0.4 acres from RS5 to R6A zoning for property located at 832 Lishi Avenue. Which one do you want to withdraw? Okay, so make sure I see you.
You withdraw one? I didn't hear that.
No, this is 1725, it's fine. BL 2019-1727 by Councilmember Scott Davis, approved with conditions. Amends 3.23 acres of a specific plan district for property located at 206 Bond Street and 900, 901, 903, 908 Meridian Street and 307, 309 Cleveland Street to permit an additional restaurant in a mixed-use development. BL 2019-1741 by Councilmember Scott Davis. It changes 0.14 acres from SP to R6A zoning for property located at 1029 North 6th Street. BL 2019-1744 by Councilmember Scott Davis. It was approved by the Commission. It changes 0.25 acres from SP to RM20A zoning for property located at 1220 North 5th Street. BL 2019-1745 by Councilmember Lee. We have a letter to approve. It was approved by the Planning Commission. It changes 3 acres from AR2A to MULA zoning for property located at Murfreesboro Pike. BL 2019-1748 by Councilmember Scott Davis. It was approved by the Commission. It changes 0.16 acres from RS5 to R6A zoning for property located at 1128 McFerrin Avenue. Now the next, okay. BL 2019-1753 by Councilmember Scott Davis. It changes 0.55 acres from CN to MUNA zoning for property located at 722 and 720C McFerrin Avenue. I skipped one because Councilmember Mina Johnson asked that we pull that one out, and that was 1750. BL 2019-1756 by Councilmember Scott Davis. It was approved by the Commission. It changes 0.19 acres from SP to R6A zoning for the property located at 811 Lishi Avenue. BL 2019-1758 by Councilmember Scott Davis. It changes 0.18 acres from R6A to RM20A zoning for properties located at 147A, 147B, and 147C Elmhurst Avenue. BL 2019-1760 by Councilmember Scott Davis. It changes 0.55 acres from RS5 to RM20A zoning for property located at 738 Douglas Avenue. BL 2019-1762 by Councilmember Scott Davis. It changes 0.32 acres from RS10 to RM15A zoning for property located at 511 East Trinity Lane. BL 2019-1779 by Councilmember Scott Davis. It was approved by the Commission with conditions. It changes 0.20 acres from RS5 to SP zoning for property located at 1005 Mansfield Street to permit a detached accessory dwelling unit. All right, so all those are the items.
1798, was that earlier?
I'm checking.
1798.
1798?
Yeah, but you were on that one also, so it may have gone on the original consent.
All right. Well, we'll look for it. In the meantime, do I have a motion to, okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. All in favor of the second consent agenda, say aye. Oppose? All right. We have other items that were not on consent that Councilmember Johnson had requested that we pull out. And then at the end, I'm going to ask Mike to tell me which ones I missed, because this has been like a hopscotch. Okay, give me a second. Okay, BL 2019-1750 by Councilmember Scott Davis. It changes 1.46 acres from RS5 to RM9A zoning for property located at 1013, 1015, 1017, 1019, 1021, 1023, 1025, and 1027 McClurkin Avenue. We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Councilmember Davis.
Was approved by the Planning Commission, went in front of the Renrar Neighborhood Association. They approved of it, and so move for approval.
All right. Councilmember Mina Johnson.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure the caption is right. So it's not RS5 to RM20A originally requested, but recommended RS5 to RM9A. Is that correct? Okay, then I'm in support. Thank you.
All right. All in favor, say aye. Oppose? Okay. So now I ask you to bear with me for a minute while we do this thing. In the meantime, I'm going to invite Councilmember Berkeley Allen to give her the floor. I hope nobody has a problem. I think that she has some important conversation to have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that opportunity. I just am aware that there are a number of substitutes and amendments to BL 2019-1633, and that it actually hadn't been re-referred back to this committee, and thought it might be useful to have some of the conversation about those options before we got to the full council floor. So I would just maybe suggest that we run through those in whatever order they are. Do we ever turn them into A, B, C, and D at this point, or
I believe we do.
do we have reference points for them? I just would like for people to be aware of what those options are, rather than sort of hearing about them the first time on the council floor. There is Amendment A, which was one that I threw out there just as another option if people feel like we're not trying to resolve this issue of stopping when RM permits can be offered, to change the effective date from May 31, 2020 to January 1, 2020. And Mr. Jamison, you can clarify whether that actually does anything or is just a conversation. I mean, if that really changes what permits can be issued, because that was the question.
I'm sorry, I was making a list for the chairman, and I missed.
Okay, I interrupt. So I'm talking about the four amendments that are offered tonight that are going to be on the floor. The first one is a simple one that may or may not be offered that would change the effective date from May of 2020 to January of 20. And my question to you is, does that actually change anything, or is that I had just done it to shorten that time period of when permits could be issued, so people would feel like we were making a substantive difference.
All it does. It moves up the effective date from May to January 1st.
Right, but in terms of when permits had to be, when codes has to be notified that someone wants a permit, that's still January of 2020.
The milestones in place, correct.
So the milestones are in place, okay. So that one's an easy one. Second one was Councilmember O'Connell's, if you want to speak to that very briefly, which would change the number of new subsequent owners that could apply for a short-term rental permit from 2 to 1.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is just a simple amendment. I think most people heard me after public hearing saying I'd prefer 0. After continuing to talk to both neighborhoods and some stakeholders within the industry, just looking for sort of the best iteration of this bill that could pass. This is a simple one that reduces the number of transfers from 2 to 1. Thank you.
Okay, that's what I've got.
And I'm open to discussion if people want to jump in and talk about these. Or
Councilmember Wieters asked for the
Okay,
floor.
great.
Okay.
Thank you. Question for Mr. Jameson. With the transferability piece, which I know I struggled with, as did Councilmember O'Connell, but I'm really interested in this discussion that he's had with numerous parties. If we do reduce it from 2 to 1, that still does create a property right that runs with the land. Is that correct?
It creates the allowance for the property to remain eligible. It is not necessarily, it's never going to be anything more than an annual permit that's issued. But if you have a property that is transferred more than once, then it is no longer eligible for that permit. But the annual permit is not deemed to be a vested property right in any of these.
Even if you do the one transfer, it still
Simply
is.
maintains your eligibility. You have to comply with all the other provisions, all the other STRP regulations, but you do not lose eligibility with that one transfer. And these are all being done in the guise of RM zoning eventually essentially being phased out at various states.
Right. Okay, so there wouldn't be any vested rights or anything like that. I know we've had some emails about this potentially causing problems throughout the county of other types of permits such as this were sought also to have a vesting or a transferability piece. Is there a way to prevent that or mitigate against that possible expansion beyond a set number of actual permits?
What we've done in the recitals clauses is spell out that this is a unique scenario where permit holders or anticipated permit holders were acting under appropriate governing code that this body had in part enacted, and that through no fault of their own during that period of time would be caught up in eventual elimination. To address that subset of individual property owners and anticipated permit holders, that's the intent of this bill. And hopefully that scenario is not recreated in any other zoning context.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess one final question from me. When the state did pass their legislation with regard to short-term rentals, my impression of it is that the way that worked is that permits that were issued when a certain piece of legislation was before the council, those permits are treated according to whatever that legislation was at that time.
They are grandfathered in.
And so would that similarly already be the case with these with permits that have STR, not an ROC, but STRs in an RM zone? Would they also be grandfathered already by virtue of that state legislation?
Right. If you have an RM zone property and you have a short-term rental permit today, that cannot be deprived of you by state legislation. If you do not have that permit, this body is entitled, under the auspices of the state legislation, to eventually phase them out or prohibit them at some date certain, without violating the state law.
Without violating state law. And so what this particular measure hopes to do or aims to do is to provide for folks that are sort of in the works of a permit, like for a property that they're acquiring or working on redeveloping. Is that accurate?
So the original, the version of the 1633 that is currently pending before you, the current substitute, does try to address those people that were caught, so to speak, in the middle during a period of time when this was perfectly legal, and they made investments assuming that that would be the case tomorrow. And this is an attempt to accommodate that subset of people, but eventually phase out other RM-zoned properties in the future.
Okay, thank you so much for those answers. Thank you.
Councilmember Glover.
So, Mr. Jameson, I want to ask a question, if I may. So here we are with about 36 hours worth of information trying to figure this out. We've been battling this thing for how many years now? 6 maybe? Somewhere in that range. And we rushed into it before, and this is where we've gotten. And the state has stepped in. Various things have occurred that we're trying to fix. However, on the very last meeting of this term, we're taking a very complex issue and we're looking to put a Band-Aid on what may be a hemorrhage, in fact. With that, considering that you get a 2-year window, correct me if I'm wrong on what I'm about to say, you get a 2-year window to do a transfer, you put it into an LLC, the property is placed into an LLC, much like a trust. And so therefore, you sell the LLC, which has that asset inside of it and perhaps one or two other assets inside of it. And so it becomes perpetual. So if it becomes perpetual, then are we in fact solving anything, or are we in fact putting the smaller businesses out of business because we've opened up a loophole because of, again, unintended consequences? If I didn't ask the question well, I'll try and clarify it. Thank you.
I think there are two aspects to that I will do my best to unpack. With respect to the fact that the transfer in ownership won't have as much of an effect on an LLC or a corporate entity, because while the personnel underlying that entity could change, the shell remains intact, and so it's therefore not a real transfer. That is true. That is not changed by this legislation. That is, in fact, the case today. All non-owner occupied entities that are owned by a corporate entity have no transfer implications by virtue of the sale of the LLC. The personnel can change. I'm sorry, if the LLC changes and sells to another one, that's a transfer. But if the personnel in the LLC change, that's the case today. That is not endemic to this current substitute. With respect to the notion that we were here on the last meeting, the last day, I would defer to the sponsor, but what I have observed is after 608 passed, quickly the state legislation came into play and essentially required grandfathering of anybody that had their permit today, but did allow various other provisions which are in the current substitute that you have before you, multiple provisions that are consistent with state law. The council office then invited all council members, let us know what other changes you want that are consistent with this new state law, and we'll eventually file an omnibus bill to correct it and update us to state law. That was about a year because we were waiting on the fee study to take place. We wanted to file it in conjunction with the fee study. That took about a year and additional months. The fee study ordinance came out. This ordinance was introduced, and it was sent to everybody that had ever requested anything with respect to short-term rental properties. Councilor Allen was the first to sign off on it and is lead sponsor. I think she would probably recite to you the number of community meetings she's been to, but I would simply note all of those changes to anybody that thinks this was just brought up 6 weeks ago.
No, I don't think it was. I'm simply saying we're down to this piece of it, and we're in the 11:30th hour. So does this open up a window for a 24-month window to transfer things into an LLC? Because I can tell you businesses will be smarter than we're going to be right now if we rush into it. They'll figure it out, is what I figure they're going to do.
Sure, but any limitation we had on transfers before had the same exception to it.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to support it because I think that we're opening up again Pandora's box even further, and I think it's dangerous. So thank you, Chair.
Well, we're not voting on anything here.
Yeah,
We're just discussing. Mr. Jamison, can you clarify whether this bill, quote, opens a window or simply doesn't deal with the window that is currently there?
I think that's a better way of putting it.
Okay, I mean, so right now those transfers can happen.
Correct.
And if we do nothing, those can happen.
And continue every day.
And continue every day to an unlimited number of RM properties, which is why we think it's appropriate for us to be looking at various options here. And I appreciate the fact that there are multiple options to look at. And if we can make our peace with one today, so be it. If not, we have an option to continue into the next term, which may or may not be a good idea. That's why I would appreciate some back and forth with this group. So I appreciate your input on that. The next one, I'm not sure what its name is I believe Member Mina Johnson's. Is that correct, or is it the?
It's Councilor Henderson.
Okay, Councilmember Henderson's.
Councilmember, would you like to talk about your amendment?
Yes, please. It's a second substitute. So I think Mr. Jamison has something on your desk, colleagues, that really explains the difference of all these different substitutes and various amendments. So I would point you to that for your reference. This essentially returns the bill to the form that Council Lady Allen had when it passed the Planning Commission unanimously. So it eliminates the various milestones and the the transfers, but it does afford a longer window for those folks who are, current investors to address what they're hoping to address. So it also has all the same provisions as to the 40 HPR owners, all the other provisions that Council Lady Allen had in that original bill prior to the first substitution. And so I think, colleagues, the intent with this bill was to achieve the same ends that Council Lady Allen is working towards as it relates to RM, but this is frankly just a more simple approach. Respectfully, I feel like Council Lady Allen's is somewhat kind of over-engineered to the advantage of the speculative investors, and so this really just, I think, achieves the same goals in a simple and more clear way. And I think the investment community and real estate community is asking for clarity. And I feel as though, to Mr. Jameson's point, we have discussed this so much in this term. And so I do not want all that good work of Council Lady Allen, other colleagues on 608, those of my colleagues for whom, there are, to Council Lady Allen's map, many, many, many of these RM zone properties in their district, for that work and effort not to be for naught. So I would ask us perhaps to discount somewhat. I appreciate Councilman Glover's concerns, but I really don't feel like it is an 11th hour approach. I feel like, this is something that I shared with Council Lady Allen that I was asked Mr. Jameson to share with her intending to file. It's kind of a middle path, a compromise forward that addresses the concerns about the transfers, because while I appreciate Councilman Withers' comments as it relates to an annual permit not being a vested property right, I agree. An annual permit is not a vested property right, but if we look at the way that the state has addressed or responded to 608, it's effectively becoming that. And so there is no other place in our code, colleagues, where we allow the transference of an annual permit with the property. And I would assert to you that is a very bad precedent to set, and it frankly plays into the hands of the argument, the preemptive argument at the state. Whereas this is a much more simple, clear, no transfers, bigger window, and I think it is just a clearer and more simple bill, and I would welcome any questions you might have about it.
I'm going to do a small intermission at this point. And tell you that, and Councilmember Hager, you're next on the queue, but there are some legislations here that if any of you wants to co-sponsor so we can discuss them, we have 6 that didn't get voted on before. So I wanted to let you know which ones they are, just in case any of you wants to go and co-sponsor, okay? One is by Councilmember Van Rees, 1755. The other one is by Councilmember Hall, 1757. Next one.
55.
So I wanted to give you time to walk over there and sign it. Councilmember Glover, we're going to discuss yours, 1766, shortly. 1768 by Councilmember Swope needs a co-sponsor. Yes. And 1780 by Councilmember Swope needs a co-sponsor. And so I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to do what Councilmember Glover had requested. Okay, Councilmember Hager, you're on.
As to the substitute bill that I've, along with Angie Henderson and Mina Johnson, I've said it the last time we were at this meeting, that you can have no transfer that goes with the land. As such, I'm not going to support any type of bill that allows the transfer of that permit with the property. It has to be with the owner only, the person that's applying for the permit, and that's it. And that's why we've got this substitute bill, and I ask everybody to support it. Same thing we did with 608. It goes in line with 608. I worked hard on that for over a year to get it passed, and that's what the legislature came back and said, you know, that they've already got the permit, they're grandfathered in. But there's no transfer. Either they renew their permit every year, they sell the property, they lose it. That's it. Permit goes with the person, not the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Lady Mina Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I am supporting this substitute. I think this one is a great compromise because it will bring Council Lady Allen's original intent to eliminate RM zoning, investment type of short-term rental from RM zoning. And while if you are owner-occupied, they can still continuously obtain a permit in RM zoning. That has nothing to, that will not change. The danger, Councilmember Hager said, we have been working so hard to protect residential zoning from investment type of short-term rental. So 608 successfully achieved that. But this substitute offered by Councilmember Allen and Councilmember O'Connor have transfer rights that will adversely tied permit to the property, not to the property owner. Although intent is to only apply this RM zoning, but we have no guarantee, that somebody may try to open up the permit transfer rights into R and RS zoning. If that happens, all 6 years, our effort will go out of the window. So there will be no short-term regulation in this city. So for that, I believe this substitute will be very simple and give plenty of time for the investment community to continuously develop, continuously transfer the permits. So if you want to have good intent or original intent of Berkeley Allen, I would recommend to support this second substitute.
I have that we haven't actually voted on it.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Member Berkeley Allen, would you like to?
Thank you. And then I would just refer to the final one, which is also Councilmember Mina Johnson's, which was sort of our keeping our options open. Bill, if you want to talk about that one as well.
Thank you, Chair. Another substitute is simply bring the language to compliance with state regulation, Short-Term Rental Act, because many people expressed this short-term rental unit regulation is so complex. So what I'm offering it by my substitute is simply do nothing change, no change. Just leave existing short-term regulation as is, so next council can take time and decide which way they want to go. But at the same time, we don't want to hang our regulation, non-compliance with the state of Tennessee language. So this substitute will simply bring the language compliance with the state of Tennessee, as well as including erroneously honored permit in the HPR, so we can prevent further lawsuits for that portion.
Thank you, Council Member. I'm going to end the debate now, the conversation.
Thank you for that opportunity. I just wanted people to, for this committee at least, to be able to run it through. I appreciate that.
No, I think it's great. We appreciate your efforts on this, and unfortunately, I want to make sure we get the other ones voted on before people have to leave to the committees. So I'm going to read the ones that we needed people to co-sponsor, and I'm going to put them together as a consent agenda if people had actually signed on them.
You've got Haywood here now on 1623.
Councilmember Haywood, that will be the first one. And it's on consent. Don't worry about it. Thank you. BL 2019-1623, Councilmember Haywood is here. It changes 20.49 acres from RS20 to AR2A zoning for the property located at 3801 Knight Drive, and it was approved by the commission. The next one is by Councilmember Van Rees. Did you co-sponsor, Mr. Wieters? Councilmember Wieters. That will be BL 2019-1755 by Councilmember Van Rees and Councilmember Wieters. It changes 1.05 acres from OG to MUGA zoning for a property located at 624 West Due West. Anybody co-sponsor Councilmember Hall legislation?
I believe I did, yeah.
Yes, thank you, sir. So this one is BL 2019-1757 by Hall and Glover. It changes 23.34 acres from SP to RS15 to SP zoning for property located at 4269 Ashland City Highway and Ashland City Highway and number to permit up to 100 residential units. The next one on the consent agenda will be by Councilmember Swope. Did you sign on that one too? Yes, I did. All right. BL 2019-1768 by Councilmember Swope and Glover. It cancels 7.17 acres of a planned unit development overlay district for a property located at 491 King Hook Drive. And the next item on consent will be BL 2019-1780 by Councilmember Swope and Glover. It changes 8.19 acres from R40 to SP zoning for property located at 527 Old Hickory Boulevard and Old Hickory Boulevard and number to permit up to 32 multifamily residential units. Do I have a motion? There is a motion to approve. Is there a second? All in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? All right. And we have two items that are not on consent that I'm going to read real fast, and then we'll be done. You guys can go on your merry way.
I thought we did.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. What will I do with that, Councilmember Ellen? So all in favor of the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Oppose? Thank you. All right, trying to move this thing along. Councilmember Glover, you have 1776, BL 2019-1766. It changes 14.6 acres from RS15 to SP zoning for property located at 5581, 5585, 5587 South New Hope Road to permit 29 two-family lots, and it was pulled.
Yeah, I need to move the amendment, please.
Yes, let me put you on the microphone. Go ahead, Councilman.
Yeah, I'd like to move the amendment, please.
So we have a motion for the amendment. Is there a second? It's a motion and a second.
What this simply does is it does everything that I promised after the public hearing. We've removed that STRPs cannot go into any of this. The HOA also will say no rental. However, that gets into various laws. That was a little more difficult, but the STRPs will be built into the SP, and therefore they cannot do STRPs on any of this property.
Thank you. Councilmember Mina Johnson.
Thank you. Just a question. I think at the community meeting, there was some concern about the density and the rural character, and I think District Council member said he's going to follow up with the community meeting. So I'm just curious, any consensus or anything made after that?
Yeah, we went back. I mean, the people still, they still say it's duplexes. It's not. It's villas. It is exactly the same density that matches everything that several of the builders have done back in my district. It is villas. It is not duplexes. They are connected, but I mean, these are 1,800 square foot at minimum on each side, and they go up to like 2,600 square feet. These are $350,000 to $450,000, $500,000 homes each. It is set up for more of the 55-plus market. And the reason I was okay with that is because it did not put an additional strain on the schools, and frankly, the traffic really, because you don't have the same work patterns. And so therefore, the majority of the community was fine. There were some that I will never get them happy because they're just not going to be happy. But it was approved. We did multiple community meetings on it, and so therefore I renew approval, please.
All right, any more comments, questions? All right, we have a motion. Will you move the amendment?
Yes, I mean,
And so let's vote on the
did we
amendment.
pass the amendment?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
was-
Yeah, move the
so-
amendment, I'm sorry. Yep.
All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Now you may move the.
Move the bill as amended, please.
So we have a motion. Is there a second? There's a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, now we have an abstention by Councilor Mina Johnson. The next item, okay, 2 abstentions. I need your help on the next one. This is BL 2019-1783 by Council Members Potts and Blaylock. We have a letter to approve. Neither one of them is here. Councilor Mina Johnson asked to be pulled, so I'm going to read it. It changes 4.58 acres from RS10 to SP zoning for property located at 5009 Raywood Lane and 4930 Nolan Street Pike to permit 180 multifamily residential units. Anybody wants to make a motion? There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
And Mr. Jameson, do I need to sign on this? Because if people are unhappy with it, I'm sorry.
We have a letter.
No,
Oh, you have a letter. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you say letter.
Well, the reason I was asking is in the past, when there was nobody here to answer questions.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. All right, thank you.
All right. So we have a motion. Is there a second? Second. Okay. So Council Lady Mina Johnson, you pull this one out?
Yes, I just wanted to ask a question to the planning table. I think it was staff originally recommended for disapproval. Did I read it right?
No, this was recommended for approval by staff. There was an associated plan amendment, and so the recommendation, so there was a plan amendment that went with this, and so the recommendation in your staff report would have said approve if the associated plan amendment is approved and disapprove if not. So the plan amendment was approved, so then what you end up with is an approval recommendation. And so the Planning Commission approved both the plan amendment to neighborhood evolving as well as this. So staff recommendation was to approve.
Thank you. And also, this was said senior living quotas, so that's the SP specified such use, not only just multi-housing, but specifically senior living?
I believe that the applicant intends to enter into a private agreement. However, that will not be enforceable by Metro. So age restrictions such as that would not be enforceable.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Berkeley Allen.
Thank you. I read in the staff report that at one point they were waiting for a traffic impact study to be done, and that may be what Councilmember Johnson was referring to, that it wasn't approved until all that information was in. Has that traffic impact study been done?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the traffic impact study was done. Well, I'm sorry, they actually got a waiver request because of the agreement that it would be senior living, and so they may have to do a more detailed study with final, but that was one of the conditions that was added.
So how,
traffic and parking.
what's the what's the mechanism for y'all to know whether they actually do that piece of it to ensure that that traffic impact study gets done if they don't do that piece of it?
They would have to, well, it's a bit convoluted because they're saying essentially that there's going to be less traffic because of the age restrictions. And so they can tell Public Works that they have agreed to those age restrictions and show that private agreement. And then they'll do their traffic study, and the numbers would be, the generation numbers would be based on a senior living type of facility. And so Public Works has included a condition that either planning or Public Works can require a comprehensive traffic study with the final site plan.
So there is someone who is watching for that information so it won't slide past. Is that correct?
With the final site plan, there's condition.
With the final, and so at the final site plan phase, then if they go back and do the traffic impact study, is there an opportunity for some entity to say, based on this study, you have to do these things?
Yes, that's what, if there's a traffic impact study required and it has certain improvements that are tied to the traffic study, then it would be conditions that those be met. And so that
Okay.
would be the point.
It will become part of the SP?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Wieters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could staff remind me, I was present at this, happened to be present at this meeting. There, was some contention, I think it's safe to say, at that meeting. And one of the points that's been raised in some of the letters that I wanted to seek clarification on is the extent to which our LUPA or, religious land use exemptions apply to this property, particularly with a policy change in particular. And do those religious land use exemptions, are they limited to, in other words, are you allowed to do whatever is considered appropriate within the base zoning, or how does that work with the policy change from neighborhood maintenance to evolving? If I could get a technical answer on that.
It's a question for you.
I'm sorry.
I can say that I think that the policy question is irrelevant as regards to a religious land use or institutionalized person's claim. That is not the route that they've gone. They chose to do a rezoning to put it into an SP. If they were to say and claim RLUPA, then that's a different process, one that we would not be involved in. And Mike may be able to speak a little bit better to the legalities of that, but they chose to go the route of the SP. But there are still, if this were to not pass, there are still some potential paths forward that they could have, given both that the RLUPA and the state Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
All right, Councilmember Sledge. You're the last one.
Thank you, Chair. I think I got a good bit of questions answered regarding kind of the site. I will point out, I mean, regardless of the Religious Use Exemption Act, I think it's actually pretty good use of land when it comes to being creative with types of housing on institutional landholders, and I'd like to encourage more institutions to do such. I'll be supporting.
All right, so we have a motion for approval. I think we did, right? Well, let's just make it again just in case. I need a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. Oppose?
5 to 1.
And one abstention. Well, that's it. Thank you very much for your patience. Meeting is adjourned. Oh, thank you very much for serving with us. I mean, this has been great, the whole thing. I really enjoy being honored by it. Councilmember Mina Johnson.
I'm going to have to update it.
Yes, Councilmember.
So we are not taking any recommendation on the 1633 substitute, just a discussion?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Sorry, Mike, I tried.
That's all right. Let me just...
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.